committing the crime, the next day, Charles admitted to Caril that he held up the gas station, but denied killing Robert, claiming that it was someone else. He later stated that Caril was not fooled by this and claimed this created a bond between them that sealed their fate. But this feeling of euphoria would only last for so long before some dark realities started to creep in. Charles was fired from his job, and he was locked out of his house. Worse yet, his family and Caril's family were entirely against their relationship and went out of their way to do any and everything to break them up. He was becoming even more desperate. Charles drove over to Caril's house on the afternoon of January 21st, 1958. When he arrived, he brandished a .22 rifle and headed to the back door, where he knocked. Velda Bartlett, Caril's mother, answered the door. Charles claimed that his sole purpose for visiting Caril's parents was to repair their relationship. He brought the rifle and ammunition, hoping to go hunting with Caril's stepfather, Marion Bartlett, and also stated that he had brought 2 discarded carpet samples he had found for Velda. Marion and Velda were in the home with their 2.5-year-old daughter, Betty Jean, who was crying. According to Charles, Velda told him that she and her husband did not want him seeing Caril anymore. A loud argument ensued, with Charles claiming that Velda hit him a few times. He further stated that he left the house without the rifle and drove around for a while, before coming back to the house to get the gun. Allegedly, this is when Marion kicked him out the door. According to Charles, he then went to a payphone to call Marion's work, telling them that he was ill and would not be at work for a few days. He then went back to Caril's home and waited for Caril to return from school. When she came home, he told her about the argument he had with her parents. She then allegedly went into the house and began arguing with her mother, with Charles following her into the home. This is all Charles Starkweather's account of the events. I will come back to this with Caril's account. When Charles entered the home, Velda started hitting him again as she yelled that he made Caril pregnant. He hit Velda and a struggle ensued for a few minutes before Charles grabbed his gun. Right at that moment, Caril's stepfather came in with a claw hammer, and Charles shot him in the head. Velda allegedly came at him with a knife, and Charles shot her in the face. She still tried to get up, reaching for Betty Jean, when Charles rammed the butt of the rifle into her head a couple of times. He then hit the 2-year-old with the butt of the rifle. Charles recounted, "I picked up that knife that the old lady had, started to walk in the bedroom, and the little girl kept yelling, and I told her to shut up. I started to walk again, and just turned around and threw the kitchen knife I had at her. They said it hit her in the throat, but I thought it hit her in the chest. I went on into the bedroom. Mr. Bartlett was moving around, so I tried to stab him in the throat, but the knife wouldn't go in. I just hit the top part of it with my hand, and then it went in." After these events, Velda's body was dragged to the old outhouse and shoved down the toilet opening. Betty Jean was also taken to the outhouse, but she was placed inside a box that was used for garbage. Then Marion's body was dumped on the floor of the chicken coop. Once the victims' bodies were hidden, Charles claimed that he and Caril cleaned up the crime scene inside the house and spent the rest of the evening eating potato chips and drinking Pepsi. They stayed in the house for almost a week, buying milk and bread on credit every day. Numerous people would stop by the house, but were turned away with a sign on the front door stating, "Stay away, everybody is sick with the flu." But that didn't stop everyone. Mary and Bartlett's boss came to the door one day, curious to see just how sick he really was. Caril came out and told him that her father was bedridden with the illness. Then Caril's sister Barbara came by with her husband, Bob Von Bush, and Caril allegedly told them both the same story about the flu. Both were highly suspicious of Caril's claims. So Bob came back with his brother to investigate. Caril told them in tears, "Please don't try to get in. Mom's life will be in your hands if you do." The brothers would go to the police to find the answers they wanted. When the police showed up, Caril told them that the family had the flu. They asked her why her brother-in-law would call the police if the family just had the flu. Whatever she told the officers, they felt the young girl was sincere and not in any danger, so they left without any suspicion. They later told Bob that there was no reason for alarm. But Bob and Barbara were still suspicious and had one of Caril's close friends go to the house. This time, a new story was heard. In a low whisper, Caril told her friend, "Some guy is back there with Chuck. He has a Tommy gun. I think they're going to rob a bank." This friend did not tell Barbara and Bob about it, but went home to tell her father, who called the police. Soon, Caril's grandmother came over. Knowing that the flu story was not going to cut it, she decided to go along with one of her other stories. She reportedly told her grandmother, "Go home, Grandma. Oh, Granny, go away. Mommy's life is in danger if you don't." But Grandma got mad and told her granddaughter angrily, "If you don't open this door this second, I'm going to go to town and get a search warrant. You've got Chuck in there with you, and don't tell me you don't." Caril still refused to let her grandma inside. So Grandma went to the police. At her insistence, the officers searched the house, but they didn't check too thoroughly. In the house, they saw it was empty and nothing raised suspicion. Still, Bob Von Bush was not having it and demanded authorities thoroughly search the entire property. Officers refused his request. Charles's father even went to the police, wanting them to pick up his son for questioning, but his request was also denied. That's when Bob took matters into his own hands. With the help of his brother, they searched the Bartlett's home and property, where their fears were confirmed. This time, their pleas to authorities were taken seriously, and an alert was issued for Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate to be brought in. Charles and Caril needed to skip town, as there were just too many people coming by the home, causing alarm. But this would also prove to be an obstacle, as the vehicle needed new tires. He tried to mend the worst one before leaving, but the repair did not hold. They were able to stay with a 72-year-old family friend of the Starkweathers named August Meyer. The old bachelor had a farm about 20 miles outside of Lincoln where Charles used to hunt. As the couple went down the dirt road, Charles's car got stuck in the mud. Again, this is mostly taken from Charles Starkweather's accounts. And what truly happened remains a mystery, as their stories were completely different. What is known for certain is that Charles shot August in the head. Charles claimed he killed August out of self-defense. Charles stated that August tried to shoot him, but his gun jammed, so Charles shot back. He also claimed that he wounded August's dog as the animal ran away. After this, Charles carried the body to a building on the property, covering it with a blanket. Then Caril and he went into August's home, ate his food, stole his money, took his guns, and went to sleep. The next day, one of August's neighbors helped Charles and Caril free the vehicle from the mud. They then took another road to August's farm. Charles would then check to make sure that August's body was still covered in the building. he soon became scared. The blanket he had covered his friend with was gone. Fearing that someone had discovered the body, the couple drove the vehicle down the dirt road, getting stuck yet again. So they took the weapons from the car and left it where it was. Keeping their shotguns hidden, Charles and Caril then hitched a ride from 17-year-old Robert Jensen and his 16-year-old girlfriend, Caril King. Almost instantly, Charles had his shotgun pointed at Robert's neck, demanding money from the pair and making them drive back towards August's farm to an abandoned storm cellar. When they arrived, Charles shot Robert 6 times in the head. He reportedly tried to rape Caril, but was unable to do so. Becoming angry with her, he shot her in the head. Caril's body was left half naked, with her jeans and panties around her ankles, with stab wounds to her stomach and privates. Again, the stories of what actually happened differ. Charles claimed that he shot Robert and Caril Fugate mutilated and shot Caril King because Charles was sexually attracted to her. But Caril Fugate claimed she remained in the car the entire time while the crime took place. The teenagers' bodies were left in the storm cellar as Charles and Caril took off in Robert's car. The couple discussed going to Washington State to stay with Charles's brother. That was the plan. But for some reason, they drove back to Lincoln, their hometown where everyone knew them and everyone was looking for them. Not only was this an incredibly stupid thing to do on their part, but they also decided to drive past Caril's home because they wanted to see if the bodies had been discovered. It wasn't hard to figure out when they saw police cars parked around the entire property. The pair eventually decided they would drive to the most affluent section of town, where they fell asleep in their stolen vehicle. The next day, Charles's car was found stuck in the mud at August Meyer's farm. It did not take long for the bodies of August, Robert, and Caril King to be found. After these grim discoveries, a massive manhunt for Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate was underway, without authorities knowing that their culprits were right under their very noses. Charles became well acquainted with the affluent part of town from his trash collection days. This is how he planned for his next victims. A 47-year-old man who was close friends with the governor and president of the Capitol Bridge and Capitol Steel Companies, C. Lauer Ward, and his socially prominent wife, Clara. On the morning of January 28, 1958, Clara and their 51-year-old maid, Lillian, were home with their 2 dogs. Charles knocked at the front door while Caril remained in the car. When the maid answered, Charles pointed his gun at her and forced his way into the home. There are so many conflicting stories as to what actually occurred. I found stories where Charles forced Clara to make him pancakes and waffles, waiting on him hand and foot, while others stated he just barged into the home, killing the women and dogs instantly. But what is known is that the women were stabbed to death and one of the dogs' necks were broken because it would not stop barking. When he finished, Charles called his father, telling him to pass a message on to Bob Von Bush. He told him to tell Bob that he was going to kill him for interfering with his relationship with Caril. After murdering the wealthy Clara Ward, he must have known that his reign would be coming to an end, as he then sat down to write a letter for the law only. The note was an illiterate tirade, confession, and an attempt at justifying his actions. A snippet from this letter read, "I and Caril are sorry for what has happened, 'cause I have hurt everybody because of it, and so has Caril. But I'm saying one thing. Everybody that came out there was lucky they're not dead, even Caril's sister. While the killer couple were in the ward residence, the newspaper arrived. Charles was elated to see his picture on the front page, along with Caril and her dead family. At about 5:30 p.m., Lower Ward arrived home when Charles fatally shot him. Charles and Caril then ransacked the home, searching for valuables. Then they loaded up in Ward's black 1956 Packard, fleeing from Lincoln. The next day, Ward's cousin and business associate called the house throughout the morning because Lauer did not come into work. When it was noon, he decided to go over to the house and let himself in. The bodies of Lauer, Clara, and Lillian were then discovered. As Lauer was a close friend of the governor, he was immediately notified of the deaths. After hearing of the savage murders, the governor called the National Guard in for help finding the culprits. The city was sealed off as the National Guard roamed the streets. The FBI started an investigation, and an aircraft was sent to look for the ward's stolen black Packard. Parents hurried to the schools to bring their children home, while the mayor offered a $1,000 reward. Again, their plan was to head to Washington, but for some reason, they ended up back at Caril's parents' home. However, they did not go inside because there was a car in the driveway and the house was lit up. For some reason, it was as if they thought they could just hide out in the house. Or maybe Caril or Charles wanted to grab something from the house. I don't know. But seeing as how they kept going back, it appears they wanted something from the house. Seeing as how it was not an option, the couple finally embarked on their journey toward Washington. They drove all night and were in Wyoming the next morning on January 29th, 1958. They searched for a car to steal along the way, when they finally spotted one with a person sleeping inside. A traveling shoe salesman from Montana named Merle Collison was sleeping in his Buick. Charles woke the unsuspecting man, telling him they were going to swap vehicles. Whatever the man said or didn't say caused Charles to shoot him numerous times in the head, neck, arm, and leg. Collison was dead in the front passenger seat. Caril sat in the back with Charles in the driver's seat. He started the car but could not figure out how to release the emergency brake. A passerby noticed the vehicle and stopped, figuring that they were having car trouble. When the Good Samaritan approached the vehicle, Charles pointed his gun at him and demanded, "Raise your hands. Help me release the emergency brake or I'll kill you." The helpful man then noticed the dead body slumped in the passenger seat. But luck would have it that a Wyoming deputy sheriff stopped. Caril noticed the officer and immediately jumped out of the car, running to Deputy Romer screaming, "Take me to the police!" After assuring her that he was a deputy sheriff, Caril pointed at the car and cried, "He's killed a man!" While Caril was seeking help from the officer, Charles ran back to the stolen Packard and drove toward the town of Douglas. Deputy Romer ordered a roadblock and began pursuing Charles. A Douglas police chief and sheriff received the call from Romer when Charles raced past them at a speed exceeding 100 miles per hour. The sheriff shot out the back window of the Packard when Charles suddenly came to a stop in the middle of the highway. He thought he had been shot when the back glass shattered and cut his ear. The sheriff and police chief pulled up beside the vehicle and waited cautiously for Charles Starkweather to get out. He was ordered to put up his hands, but he didn't. So the chief shot at the ground near his feet and ordered him to lie on the ground. Charles reached in back of his pants to tuck in his shirt tail, causing authorities to think he was reaching for a weapon. Another shot was fired near Charles. Finally taking the hint, he lay down and did as he was told. Needless to say, when authorities heard he stopped because he thought he was bleeding to death, they were disgusted with him. Charles believed that if he were to be tried in Wyoming for the murder of Merle, then he would die in a gas chamber, but in Nebraska, he would be sent to the electric chair. As neither option sounds too appealing, he chose to go to Nebraska. But in reality, if he were to have stayed in Wyoming, he would have been serving a life sentence because the governor of Wyoming was against the death penalty. He and Caril were extradited back to Nebraska at the end of January 1958. Charles was obviously thrown under the bus for the murders, while Caril maintained she was innocent. She claimed to be a hostage of his throughout the entire spree. No one truly knows her culpability in the crimes. When Charles was being interrogated, he initially stated that he committed all the murders, but he would change his story to say that Caril committed some of them. From Caril's story, she stated that her and Charles were broken up when she found him in her home on January 21st. She stated that she had told him numerous times to leave her alone, but he kept chasing after her. On the day her family was murdered, she claimed she came home from school to find Charles holding her at gunpoint. He told her that her family was being held by a few of his gang members, and if she did not do what he said, then he would call these friends to kill her family. But therein lies the problem. She admitted to authorities that she had been with Charles of all of the Nebraska murders. And when they were at the Wards' residence, when the newspaper arrived, their picture had been cut out and found in their possession, leading many to believe that she knew her family was dead the entire time. Both Charles and Caril were charged with first-degree murder and murder while committing a robbery. The couple were tried as adults and faced being sent to the electric chair. On May 5, 1958, Charles Starkweather's trial began, and he did absolutely nothing to help in his defense. His lawyers were desperately trying to put together an insanity defense, but Charles maintained that he was sane. He did not want to be seen as insane. Apparently, in his eyes, it was worse to be seen as insane rather than a cold-blooded killer. When Charles was first captured, the first words he told authorities in Douglas, Wyoming were, "Don't be rough on the girl. She didn't have a thing to do with it." But as time passed, he came to the realization that Caril was trying to set herself up as an unwilling hostage instead of his girlfriend. This is when his story changed and he began implicating her in the crimes. He even stated, "She could have escaped at any time she wanted. I left her alone lots of times. Sometimes when I would go in and get hamburgers, she would be sitting in the car with all of the guns. There would have been nothing to stop her from running away." After an exceedingly emotional plea from his lawyer, the jury made its decision within 24 hours. They found him guilty on both counts of first-degree murder, with the jury asking for the death penalty. Their request was granted, and he was executed by the electric chair on June 25, 1959. He did not give any last words, and reportedly was indifferent about his fate. While still imprisoned, Charles allegedly wrote a letter to his father stating that he was not sorry for what he did, because for the first time, him and Caril were having fun. Caril's defense was built around her being held hostage, but the jury was not convinced of her innocence and found her guilty of murder on November 28, 1958. However, she did not receive the same sentence because she was only a 14-year-old girl. Instead, she received a life sentence and was sent to the Nebraska Center for Women. Caril was considered to be a model prisoner while locked up, and after serving 18 years, she was paroled on June 20th, 1976 from York Women's Reformatory. After being paroled, she lived in Lansing, Michigan for a while and worked as a janitorial assistant and nanny. She even took a polygraph test on live television to prove that she was not a willing accomplice in the murders, and she passed it. She would go on to marry Frederick Clare in 2007, who worked as a weather observer for the National Weather Service. Unfortunately, on August 5th, 2013, the couple was in a single vehicle accident where Caril was seriously injured and her husband died. Caril attempted to receive a pardon for the crimes she was found guilty of. Her application was supported by relatives of the murder victims as she maintained her innocence. Her request for a pardon was to alleviate the burden of being known as a convicted killer. In February 2020, Caril was denied a pardon by the Nebraska Board of Pardons, stating that the role of a pardon is to restore a felon's rights, and because her request was too broad for the parole board. At the time of this episode, Caril Fugate is still alive and is 80 years old today. The murder spree of Charles Starkweather and Caril Fugate has been the inspiration for many creative works in the media. Numerous books, television shows, movies, video games, and songs have been credited by their slayings. And so it appears the hopeless nobody from Nebraska lives in infamy for one of the worst and most notorious crimes in history. What did you think of today's episode? Do you think Caril was an innocent hostage of Charles Starkweather or a willing accomplice? Do you think she will ever receive a pardon? Let me know your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like and follow for more episodes. Thank you for listening and your support. Stay safe, and I will see you for the next episode. Bye.